Star Citizen has released a new ground vehicle, the Greycat MTC. It actually may be my favorite ground vehicle for the current version of Star Citizen, period. With room for two, storage for gear, space for boxes, a turret for defense, and durability for a multitude of situations, it makes sense for a lot of mercenary-style gameplay, which is a lot of what I do. But I still wouldn't recommend you get it. This thing suffers from two major issues. One is of its own doing, but the other is a problem with the whole game. Let me show you just how much a vehicle like the Greycat MTC can improve your game as a 1 or 2 person team, and why it ends up being a big miss due to just a couple issues. And if you'd like to see it in action, you can check out my full gameplay session with the Asgard over on my gameplay channel, uploaded just a few days ago. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. The Greycat MTC is a small military APV suited for duos. It comes standard with suit lockers and weapon lockers for players to eventually change out their gear as the environment calls. But that's not its only storage. It also has some personal storage that can be accessed from the interior or the exterior of the vehicle. This is pretty useful for your personal items, some loot, medical tools, multi-tools, and other miscellaneous things. But it's not where the bulk of your loot is going to go. A big benefit of this vehicle over the Ursa line is the inclusion of a proper cargo grid in the form of a slide-out cargo rack. The Ursa can carry boxes, but they'll be insecure, which could cause problems in the future. This cargo rack on the MTC is a pretty sleek system on the exterior of the vehicle that loads about a half SCU of cargo into a system that makes good use of a vehicle taking up a smaller footprint than the other closed cockpit truck, the Ursa. But in an incredibly weird turn of events, it's not actually small enough to make sense or make a difference versus the Ursa in a lot of situations, but I'll get to that in a little bit. In addition to the size benefit that it does have though, it is also reportedly tankier than the Ursa, meant to take on rougher scenarios and also with better handling. Then there's the defensive. Not a huge benefit over other popular ground vehicles, the size 2 turret up top is more a deterrent or covering fire against ground troops than it is a true attack weapon on the scale of Star Citizen. Better than the Ursa though, but I think both work for the current game, which doesn't have you really going up against reinforced positions, but rather some poorly dressed meatbags. It'll surely do some damage to some level, and it can be controlled by either the driver or the support seat in the back of the vehicle, so it is a very convenient addition to the vehicle. And the vehicle itself also looks pretty good. I find Greycat, especially on the interior, hits a nice balance between a company like Argo and RSI. A bit utilitarian, a bit of a balance between an industrial and light military, almost PMC vibe. Or maybe I'm just full of it. This vehicle comes at a particular time. The Starlancer TAC that we covered not long ago meets the call for mercenary missions in Star Citizen's current environment. A respawn point, ground coverage, a hangar, space for vehicles, equipment, cargo, and your friends. The Greycat MTC acts as a perfect addition to the party. It doesn't cover the respawn like the Nursa might, but with the TAC, you don't need it. You have space for 2 of these vehicles, so you and 3 friends can head out in a Star TAC and run missions for hours, taking turns raiding ground locations. You'll be able to go in any size party from 1 to 4, given the turret functionality of the MTC, and you've got plenty of space to spread out in between missions. While I've got a bone to pick with CIG for putting this in the game instead of going back and making the G12, which very obviously should be the vehicle coming into the game right now, this is a different type of ground vehicle than the G12 was. Though I do hope we either see the G12 soon, or hear why we're not seeing it at all. There's a lot of potential for a small specialized ground vehicle like this to make Star Citizen an equally interesting game on the ground and aloft, but like I said before, it's not really small enough. See, the main benefit of a vehicle like this, in my opinion, is the ability to act as a closed canopy STV or Cyclone with additional amenities. Things like cargo and obviously life support. I see this as a solo-focused raid runner, meant for the current version of Star Citizen in which 95% of mercenary missions can be handled by 2 players in a ground vehicle. But then you look at the selection of ships that 1 to 2 people might use for these missions that may also carry a Cyclone or STV, and you run into a problem. The MTC doesn't fit in a C1 Cyclone, it doesn't fit in a Cutlass Black, it doesn't fit in a Freelancer, it doesn't fit in the Avenger, or on a Nomad, even in the back of an RSI Zeus. It does fit in a Freelancer Max, which is kind of a two-person ship, but so does the Ursa. In order to haul this thing around, you're going to need something like an MSR or, conveniently, an Asgard. This certainly doesn't kill the vehicle, it is still incredibly useful for the cases that I mentioned before, and it'll still be a great small vehicle for any group that's flying in a ship that can fit it, especially with the more localized gameplay coming online like we see with the new maintenance missions. But for what I consider this to be perfect for, which are solo or duo focused mercenary contracts in easier to obtain ships, this is a pretty big setback. If there's no reason to take this over an Ursa and a smaller ship, you're kinda missing out. But this still isn't as big a problem as the ground vehicle performance in general that affects both the Ursa, this, and anything else that has 4 wheels. No matter what combination of features we see in any 4 or 2-wheeled vehicle in this game, it won't matter until Star Citizen finally gets the resources it deserves to make ground gameplay worthwhile. There are meant to be time sinks in Star Citizen, but retrieving your vehicle is meant to rely on an auxiliary elevator that brings your vehicle up to you ready to load. Beyond that, as persistence improves when we log off, we'll simply have a vehicle already loaded on our ship the next time, if we're responsible drivers. The slight complications in getting vehicles into ships has diminished over time, but still can catch players off guard, and the lack of any teaching mechanics makes it harder for new players. Beyond that, most places that we go are very easily visited by a ship. There once was an effort to emphasize larger caves for vehicular gameplay, but those have grown dusty over the years. Distribution centers have vast perimeters that can call for careful ground approaches, but they are currently not being utilized anywhere near their fullest extent. Bunkers and outposts will often have you fly into potential hostile areas, which do call for ground vehicle usage, but oftentimes don't hold enough of a reward to justify the lengthier process we laid out earlier. At least not for most solo or duo parties. That being said, these new outposts we've been seeing, as well as the bunkers in Stanton, are a good start, but ones we've been seeing since literally 2018. Until CIG can start to utilize better deterrence, more enticing rewards, more engaging conflicts, or even weather that limits our flight paths, ground vehicles will continue to be optional for most players in the game, which may not be a bad thing, but definitely isn't going to get you the best testing data or develop the best game. Oh, also the rocks are kind of annoying, get rid of a bunch of those. Finally, there are the vehicles themselves. I would go on about how the physics system has changed for ground vehicles since the days of John Pritchett, who is now working on X4, but you've probably seen it. Sometimes ground gameplay can be a great time, but more often than not, you're fighting your vehicle. Whether it's slightly lifting off the ground at every tiny bump in a full gravity environment, or bouncing all over the place as you try to simply drive over a hill. The ground vehicle situation in Star Citizen is still pretty frustrating. As a regular attendee of the Daymar Rally, I can tell you there's still plenty of work to be done here as well, before vehicles like the MTC can shine their brightest. Despite everything I just said, I don't think much actually needs to change for this part of the game to be a consistent joy. Star Citizen already has, in my opinion, the best combination of ground and space-based gameplay you can find. But there are just a couple different fixes that we could see that would make a big difference to ground gameplay. First are the upcoming weather systems. First concepted in the 2016 Planet Tech demo and then shown again at CitizenCon 2024, weather or atmosphere-based anomalies that disable your ship's flight are meant to be a big reason players need to embark in ground vehicles and make actual large-scale journeys away from the ship. Of course, the mission structure in the game also would go a long way. Rather than giving single objective missions that see players raid a single outpost, we need to see more reasons to travel once we've gotten to our destination. Rogue convoys that need to be snuck up on, extraction missions in locations local to outposts, larger, more well-defended structures, content placed in cave networks, more of these local maintenance missions that we're even seeing in 4.1.1. Just put them in more places like in Stanton 2. There are plenty of options for CIG to use, with Planet Tech V5 bringing in weather, new ground scatter, better biomes, and more points of interest. But until that does come in, This is definitely something we're going to be looking at to change to make ground gameplay better. Oh, also again, less rocks. Outside of these bigger additions, we also could benefit greatly from the hangar experience improving, from base building coming online, more local missions being added to the game, from suit lockers actually functioning, new types of enemies, friends, and missions spawning, and more sandbox locations being added to the game. There are a lot of things CIG could do to improve this part of the game, and that's why I think you won't have to wait long to see it happen, because as we've seen with this year, they're pretty focused on trying to fix some of the little things. While I still believe this might be the perfect companion for anybody interested in doing mercenary, investigative, or really any other FPS-based gameplay in the game who has the appropriately sized ship, I'm disappointed by the size, considering the opportunity that exists for a smaller two-person and cargo-capable ground vehicle, at a time when they really are focusing on ground gameplay. We may see something else come in that does fit that role that I was looking for this one to fill, but it leaves this vehicle sharing quite a bit in common with the bigger Ursa, and specifically the Ursa Medical, which has a respawn. So I'm going to be interested to see how all of this shakes out. While it's currently available to buy, I'll always advise waiting for it in-game in the next few months, but ultimately, you do what you do. I hope you enjoyed this video and consider subscribing for more Star Citizen content. I hope you learned something new in this one, and I'll catch you in the next.